Yeah, obviously I would have wished for to make this review without a scratch on the nose, but it's still there and it's still healing. But actually, before we are gonna jump straight into the review of the 65-inch version of the XF90, I wanna tell you where this one actually stands in relation to Sony's own competition. Because and I hope I won't mix up the model numbers, the XF90 is the current mainstream flagship, where the ZD9 is still the current high-end flagship. But the XF90 also is the direct successor and also a replacement for the XE90, but actually also a replacement in some way for the XE93, which I have to say is super sad to see that there is no direct successor to that one, since I've just recently reviewed and was fully blown away by that one. Even though I have to mention one thing, I've had this TV for 1 month here and the price since then moved into a direction that I have not expected, which also actually made me to change my whole conclusion in a different way as I would have expected. So more about that later on, but for now let's actually check the changes in terms of design, because compared to the XE90, where the foot was one wide one in the middle, we have 2 small ones at the outside. The main reason for that is they wanted to just improve the integrations for soundbars, and I definitely think they succeeded because you have enough space below it and in terms of width also. Now Sony actually also even offers exactly fitting one for, I'm not quite sure if it's the 55 or 65-inch version, doesn't really matter, because honestly I don't think many will buy that, because from my experience people are willing to pay like $100 or $200 for a soundbar, not really much more. But that already leads me to the speakers and the sound, where I have to say, once again, the same as always, if you buy such a TV with that visual qualities, you want the matching audio. And you won't get that one for sure with those speakers that are good enough to deliver you the sound that you will hear. But my recommendation once again is at least spend $100 or $150 or euros and buy at least a decent soundbar, and your overall experience will be a lot better. Now you might ask yourself, where do I plug that soundbar in? Well, no problem. At the back, down towards the bottom firing, there are the HDMI ports, and in this case I have to just tell you, if you are planning to use an HDR console or a PC, use HDMI 2 or 3, because only those support the enhanced HDI spectrum. Other than that, on the side we have the ports that you maybe have to access a little bit more often, but either way there are enough ports, more than you would need. I don't see any issues with that. Now one issue that you might think there is the glossy front, which is not glossy at all, because what it is actually brushed metal, and just because of the extreme light that I have here, the reflections are there. In normal lighting situations this was never an issue, which also wasn't an issue for example the remote control, where I have to say I'm not fully blown away, but it gets the job done. I would say you need a few days to get used to the layout, because you just need to know where all the sectors are. Every sector has its own kind of design of the buttons. They have a different shape and distinctive feel. Even though, of course, backlighting would make it easier, once you get used to it, it's okay. It's the same as it was in the past. Now, obviously, still with voice control, it gets the job done. The next thing that I really just want to cover real briefly is the menus, because if you want to see more about that, just check my A1 review, where I did check that a little bit more in depth. But as you can maybe see, and that's one thing that I've noticed, because the XF90, I didn't get that wrong, also this year compared to the XE90, yes, has the X1 Extreme chipsets, just like the XE93 and A1. And it should be faster, and it is now. But in my first English take, I actually noticed before I've loaded up that display, it can sometimes take up to 10 seconds if you first boot the TV until this menu actually appears. Other than that, once loaded, things work out fast, and then there is nothing to really be concerned about, because things then turn out fine. For some reason I still saw back then, maybe it was just a perceived thing, I saw a difference compared to the A1, compared to the XE93, even though both have the X1 Extreme chipsets. People told me there shouldn't be an issue, it couldn't be. For me still the A1 seemed faster, but maybe that just was in my imagination. What you maybe also notice, and that is not in terms of your imagination, but you've seen football already, the football mode is gone, which is a good thing, because I am not a huge fan of Motionflow. Now, people have asked me how it turns out in terms of sports. You have seen it already right now, but I'm just going to keep it quick, because the thing about Motionflow is that that's kind of like frame interpolation, and you just have to kind of insert frames that are just not there, because usually TV is displayed at 30 frames per second, and how do you want to see it at 60 frames if the frames aren't there? You can kind of calculate them, but it's still not quite the same. Now, for example, for sports like Formula 1, it worked out quite good, because things seemed a little bit smoother and it didn't have any issues. In case you wanted there, it was fine. For football, at least for my example here, it didn't work out so well. I still had some little bit of weird artifacts. For normal football, if you just watch it from a TV, the issue wasn't there and it was okay. I personally still don't like it. So if you want to use it, it is absolutely okay. But especially for movies, I can just tell you, please don't do it. Because whenever I'm at an event or a presentation and I see someone watching a cinema movie on a TV like this with Motionflow on, all I want to do is just smack him all over the room because I cannot stand it. Movies are not meant to be watched like this. But let's actually check the main qualities and let me find the cursor so I can get into these a little bit more. Because what I should maybe mention is also we have obviously a Netflix app, we have a Google Play app, we have the options, for example, if we go into the home menu for Android apps. And that definitely is nice because the YouTube app works right, the Netflix apps works really nice, but since this is running Android 7.0 still, obviously 8.0 was already announced, but they don't want to tell you when, since the whole Dolby Vision disaster, you know, they kind of keep that date a little bit restricted. But you can just easily explore your old file explorer or a player like, for example, VLC, and stream over your network your local content. And it works out really nice, absolutely no issues. But let's get actually back to the qualities. And here I want to start off with the white. And I have to just say I'm super happy with how uniform that is, because the only parts where you see a little bit of degradation of the brightness are the four corners, not the edges. Because on the X900F and on the A1, there was a big diminishing on the sides, which is not a thing here. And when it comes to the brightness, I have to just tell you one thing. With SDR content, so non-HDR content, it is easily bright enough. I used it at 25 out of 50 out of brightness. But when it comes to movies, that's something that I will get into a little bit later on, because that's something a little bit different. But the white, super nice. The black also absolutely top, because due to the full array backlight, it dims completely now in the black scenario. Even though people might say, do I see the different lighting zones kind of lighten up? Yes, you will, but these are the conditions that I had to do to get this. I had to fully black out the room. I had to adjust my eyes or let my eyes adjust to the darkness and then move the cursor from one zone to the other to see that one brighten up a little bit. Now, in normal lighting situations, with any sort of lighting in the room or with any content on the display, I don't see this to be an issue. The only place where I've actually noticed this, for example, is HDR once again. For example, when I watched Stranger Things yesterday, there was a scene where here at the corner, there was a lot of dark content and the scenes were switching from bright to white. And then you did notice of how much it dimmed and how much it brightened up. Obviously, since HDR is high dynamic range, this dynamic is very high. So it gets from very dark to very bright. And this kind of bright pump was visible. If it's annoying for you, that's something that only you have to decide, but it's just a thing that you can't avoid if you have something like this with backlight. But just to be said, HDR content, like for example on Netflix, which was the only source that I could check it with, did not fully convince me. It wasn't quite bright enough, it wasn't quite satisfying enough, which actually brings me to the next point. People have asked me how content other than 4K, which obviously looks great, looks. And let me tell you this, 4K obviously with the higher bitrate and the better quality compared to 1080p just looks stunning. Everything looks super sharp, everything looks just amazing. 1080p, if for example just watch Netflix 1080p with that quality, this is more than good enough, so you won't feel bad at all, so everything's great. Now 720p, and this is just something that I have to say, since I watch a lot of YouTube or even older TV shows that are just available in 720p, where you see artifacts, where the quality is just all that great, I have to say this one seemed a little bit worse compared to the A1 especially, and even compared to the X900F. So I'm not 100% happy with that. Colors though, I have to say, super nice. Once you adjust them a little bit more than I had to do with the A1 and also a little bit more than on the 93, you will get super pleased because those absolutely can deliver. Viewing angles are absolutely okay. They are worse than compared to on the X900F, but that's that. So like I said, HDR content, if you watch a lot of that, and you watch a lot of lower quality stuff, then maybe definitely go for the X900F or something similar. If you just watch SDR, since you don't watch maybe anything like that, and you don't watch anything lower than 1080p, you can just as well go for the XF90. No issues or no restrictions, because like I said, in normal conditions, it is bright enough, and then the artifacting and such isn't just as visible, which I'm not quite sure why it is the case, because it shouldn't be, since they use now all the same chip. But that leads me already to the gaming. And here I have to say the difference compared to the X900F is pretty much negligible. It felt just as good. The delay, for example, obviously if you have it in game mode, is absolutely fine. Since you use such a TV anyways with a console and a wireless controller, there is already a delay, and the extra delay from the TV was nothing that really concerned me at all. So I was fully pleased. There was also pretty much no proper ghosting, tearing or anything like that. The experience was really nice, especially since you play games on a TV for the better experience, not for the professional gaming where a monitor works just better since it's faster, it's more precise, but it doesn't deliver this impressive experience. Now, I think I've covered it all, but let's quickly actually summarize it. So I talked about the design, I talked about the speaker, I talked about the ports, I talked about the remote, I talked about Android, I talked about a little bit about the menus, obviously not too much because you can check that somewhere else. I've talked about Netflix, the quality on 4K, 1080p, 720p, the brightness, the viewing angles. Like I said, they are worse than on the 93 a little bit, obviously more than on the A1, which is an OLED display. So I've pretty much covered all I wanted to, so let me actually get to the conclusion now, and now I have to include the prices here. And I will quickly tell you the one from the 55-inch version and also for the 65-inch version, and then tell you what I think. So the 55-inch version of the X900, which is the predecessor to this one, costs, at least from Europe prices in Germany here, which is what I want to take, around 1,050 euros. Now you pay about 300 extra to get the XF90, and then additional about 300 more to get the X900F. Now let's get to the 65-inch version. The X900, so the predecessor once again, costs 1,550. You then pay roughly 450, if not 500 euros more for this one. So we are at the 2,000. And then the X900F is 2,400. Which, though I have to mention, this is the one thing that I've already talked about at the beginning, where the prices moved into a different direction. Because when I got this TV like a month ago, the price was at roughly 2,000 as well. So this was a direct competitor, this one, to the X900F. And in that case, I would have definitely told you, go for the X900F. It's just in pretty much all aspects better. It's brighter, HDR looks more impressive. The picture itself just looked a little bit more refined, and things just turned out to be better. Now, with the price being as it is, I can just tell you this much. 300 extra for the XF90 compared to the X900 might be worth it, since this one sits right in between, which actually leads me to one thing. Which one is the best? Well, obviously the X900F is the best. Then right in between the X900, there is the XF90. And that just shows because of one thing. On the presentation where they actually announced the XF90, there was the X900 side by side with the XF90. And you have definitely seen of how much better, obviously, the settings actually were the same. We checked that the XF90 was better. It was a little bit brighter. The picture was, especially while movement, just clearer and everything, it was better. Now obviously a little bit more future-proof with the X1 Extreme chipsets, it might be worth it paying like 300 extra more. But, and that was the reason why I actually asked, why is there no direct side-by-side comparison with the X900F? Well, I guess just because this one in comparison would have looked pale, because it's just not quite as bright, just not quite as impressive. It just doesn't have quite the image quality for some reason like the X900F. At least it could be just me perceiving that this way, or my memory playing tricks with me, but that's the way I see it. So I'm just gonna say the same as some people have said in forums. With the price difference of about 500 over the X900, I can't really recommend the XF90, because people already back then, when the X900F was 500 more than the XE said, I usually don't watch a lot of HDR content. I'm okay with a little bit of a dimmer screen, and I'm okay with a little bit of sacrifice, but I pay 500 euros more. And that totally makes sense for this one as well. Now, the only reason why you should get the X900 or the X900F is if you can still actually find them, because this is actually one thing. When I'm saying that the X900F is better, or let's say the XF90 is just a little bit inferior, or has some little bit of quirks, not being all that great for low resolution footage or for HDR, this is complaining on a very high level. And what shows this best as the price going up? Because the X900 was so popular, because in terms of value, but also especially in terms of quality, it was on such a high level, and even more so the X900F, that since it's now kind of going out and getting replaced with this one, it's getting rare. And people just want it, especially the X900F, because there is no direct successor to this one, and people want just the better. they are willing to spend that money. So shop said, okay, we are gonna bump up the price. The people will pay that. I expected something different. I thought once it kind of runs out, that's what usually was the case and maybe could still happen. Once they get rare, prices fall down. And once that it's at its lowest, my recommendation would have been just get the XE93. That was my plan. That plan went wrong, it seems, but it is what it is. So 200-300 more from the XE93 to the 90 to the from the XE90 to the XF90 makes sense because you just get a little bit more for future, just better product where it's in the middle and you pay kind of like that. But personally, I cannot say that I would pay even 400 more compared to this one for the XE93 when the XE93 was already so much cheaper. So that's something that makes it a little bit harder to recommend and is just the thing that I have to say. So like I said, complaining on a high level, the XF90 is a really great device. And the only smaller issues that I have with it personally, since I watch a lot of lower end quality content, but don't really care so much about the HDR, is that it just can't quite deliver the same performance as the XE93. But that makes me even more so sad that there is no direct successor to the XE93. Not quite sure why they went away and replaced both models, because yes, sure, this one is right in between, but if they would have improved even further on the XE93, that would have been the one to go for, and then I would have gladly paid for it. So I hope the prices for the XE93 still come a little bit lower down again, or I would just tell you this. Wait until there is no XE90 anymore. Wait until there is no XE93, so you have no option and you won't be upset if you want to have to go for this, because at this time, when those are gone, this one has fallen in price, and once this has fallen by, let's say, $200-300, then it's still great, because then it's pretty much the best option at this price point and there is nothing else to say anymore. So in case I forgot something, just let me know in the comments. I hope I covered it all and I hope it wasn't all that boring. But other than that, I wish you a nice day. Until next time, bye.